John chapter 16, verses 16 through 22. In a little while you won't see me anymore, but a little while after that you will see me again. Some of the disciples asked each other, "What does he mean when he says, 'In a little while you won't see me, but then you will see me, and I'm going to the Father'? And what does he mean by 'a little while'? We don't understand." Jesus realized they wanted to ask him about it, so he said, "Are you asking yourselves what I meant? I said, 'In a little while you won't see me, but a little while after that you will see me again.' I tell you the truth, you will weep and mourn over what is going to happen to me, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will suddenly turn to wonderful joy. It will be like a woman suffering the pains of labor. When her child is born, her anguish gives way to joy, because she has brought a new baby into the world. So you have sorrow now, but I will see you again. Then you will rejoice, and no one will rob you of that joy." just been thinking about what it was like for the disciples, Jesus' followers, when that day came when they finally did meet him, you know, when all of their sorrow was turned to joy. The way Jesus talked about, like a woman in childbirth has the pangs and the sorrow of that moment, but then it turns into this incredible joy. For me, when I imagine that, the thing, you know, I think about is like those soldier homecoming videos when you see people, their legs literally collapse beneath them, and there's tears. And you know, you ask yourself, like, why aren't they jumping up and down and high-fiving? And I think there's such an emotional storm when extreme sorrow meets extreme joy. And so when I imagine what it was like for the first disciples, my mind jumps ahead to what it will be like for us who know Jesus and love Jesus when we meet perfect love face to face. I think tears of relief that turn into shouts of joy. Jesus said it, our sorrow will turn to joy, and on that day, no one will be able to take our joy. So I was thinking about this from the perspective of Mary Magdalene. The Apostle John describes in his account how she had come out here early in the morning while it was still dark, as soon as the Sabbath was over, so that she could, you know, come to mourn and grieve at Jesus' tomb. And when she gets there, she sees that the stone has been rolled away. So for Mary, she doesn't go in. She just runs back to tell Peter and John. And they come running, and they come and they look inside, and they see that the grave clothes are there, but Jesus isn't. And so they're perplexed, they're confused, they leave and walk away scratching their heads. Even though Jesus had told them this was going to happen, that he was going to rise, they didn't get it. You know, we're like that too. We get locked into one way of thinking. We get our dreams of how life is going to be. So Mary is there, and she goes in after Peter and John leave, and she has an encounter with angels, and they say he's not here. They didn't rob the body, that he's actually alive, but she's still not getting it. And we can't be too hard on him, guys. We are the same way. We get our way of thinking how it's going to be, the way life is supposed to play out, and then we find ourselves reeling when it doesn't. And in a situation like that, our minds aren't even thinking anymore. Our hearts have just taken over, and we're stuck. So she's there weeping, and Jesus appears to her right there. And she thinks he's the cemetery groundskeeper. And he says her name. And that's the moment for her. That's the moment when her extreme sorrow met extreme joy. And she just said, "Teacher," and she just fell at his feet. And when we're reading the account, we can't rush through this too fast in John chapter 20, because Jesus says to her, "Don't cling to me." And it seems so cold and hard, you know, Jesus is like, "Get off me, woman." But I imagine she might have been there, hugged him for like an hour, you know, like in those soldier homecoming videos when the family just can't let go. And Jesus says, "Mary, there's work to be done. You need to go tell the disciples." And it's such a tender and such a powerful moment, and it always gets me thinking, not just what it was like for them, but I think about what it'll be like for us. You know, that we who love Jesus, who've experienced him changing our lives, like when we get to meet him and be with him face to face. The disciples, they were having a harder time believing Mary's word. It's actually, for me, one of the reasons why I really believe the credibility of these accounts. Nobody would have made up fiction that has Jesus' first appearance being to emotional women, might say. Nobody would have painted a picture of these disciples as having been so flaky. It, to me, speaks of the truthfulness of these accounts. So anyways, the disciples, they're gathered together behind closed doors in fear. And they've heard the women, Mary has shared her encounter with Jesus, but they're just still struggling to get it. Jesus comes to them, he appears to them, and he says, "Peace be with you." And Thomas, he isn't there. Doubting Thomas, he gets a hard rap, and none of them actually believe. Thomas wasn't there. So they encounter Jesus. He shows them like the scars on his hands, and he shows them the wound on his side, and it's Jesus. It's not a ghost. And later, Thomas is with them, and Jesus does it again. He shows back up. He says the same thing, peace. And then he says something really powerful. He says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." And I just think about, here we are 2,000 years later. On the one hand, you might say it's harder for us to believe today because we haven't physically seen Jesus. And yet, on the other hand, you could say it's easier for us because we have seen 2,000 years of history of how the risen Jesus, he's alive and he is at work and he is changing people, and he's right now speaking to you. And he wants to bring peace and he wants to bring joy into your life. Even if your dreams have been shattered, we say, why didn't those disciples believe? He told them exactly, like he gave them timeline. This is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And yet, they got locked into their dream for how it was going to play out. And we're the same way. We have our ideas, so that when we find ourselves in a situation like we're in today, when our dreams, many of us have had our dreams shattered. We have lost things that we may never be able to get back, and we're looking at the future with all the uncertainty. What if one of those disciples would have said, hang on a second, guys. I know this is hard and I don't understand, and we thought Jesus was going to come set up his kingdom and now he's gone, but wait, do you remember what he said about how you will see me again and your sorrow will be turned to joy? What if there was just one of those guys who would have said, hang on, guys, let's hold on to the words, let's cling to the promise. And I think about, I want to be that guy today. Don't you? Don't you want to be the disciple, the follower of Jesus who says, you know what? He said it, and I'm going to believe it, and I'm going to cling to it more tightly than I hold to my own dreams. So the plan of God that's given in Scripture for Jesus to die as the atoning sacrifice for the sins of the world and then be raised up and resurrected was not just so that we can believe the right theology and do the right things. It was for us to be supremely happy in His presence forever, and for us to pour back unceasing praise for what He's done for us. And I've actually said, maybe you've heard me say in a message, like, God's will for us is not to be happy, it's to be holy. And that's not actually true. Jesus said, you will see me again and your sorrow will turn to joy, and no one will be able to take away your joy. His will is for us to experience extreme happiness forever. It's just that the timing is different than the timing we think. In this life, on this earth, we have sorrow. Jesus said it, in this world you will have trouble. But He said, take heart because I've overcome the world. And so when we think about what's to come, when we think about the reunion that we're going to have with perfect love, with Jesus Himself, with the Father, all of a sudden we find there's strength to keep going through our day-to-day struggles, the difficulties, the sorrows that hit us. Hebrews chapter 12 describes this. Jesus, it says, for the joy set before him, endured the cross. And he, scorned its shame. And he sat down at the right hand of the Father. And it says, consider him who endured such opposition so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And so when we think about Jesus and what he did, we have to think about the joy that enabled him to press on. And we have to imagine that is for us. The joy that we're going to experience becomes the strength that gives us legs to keep going through our day-to-day. And I just absolutely I imagine what it's going to be like. I can't wait. The relief that's going to come out with tears of joy. We're going to cling for who knows how long. We're going to step back and we're going to say, it's really true. Like, I knew it, all along. Like, I knew it. And here's the thing, guys. This plan for us to be reunited in perfect joy, it's not automatic for everybody. Jesus made it very clear there's a choice that has to be made. We have to choose to trust Jesus and follow him.